crap. Good afternoon, friends. I'd like to welcome you to What's in Tegan's Storage Locker, the show where we dare to answer the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer today, well, friends, the answer is comic books. I grab a fistful of comic books from around my immediate surroundings. We flip through them here on the channel for your delectation. And friends, you've tuned in on a very special occasion. This is the 50th episode of What's in Tegan's Storage Locker. When I started putting these things up, I had no expectations for them. And the idea that I would reach 50 was a little bit beyond where I was starting. But it's really fun to do. It's actually the highlight of my week to record these silly little videos, and at least a few people get some enjoyment out of them. Not enough. So today, for our anniversary, you remember what we did for our first anniversary? Yeah. Our 25th episode was the All Marvel special, and it's still the most popular show I've done. So, obviously, time to go back to the well. So the first thing I'd like to ask you to do is go check out the Patreon. If you like my show, if you want to support me doing more of it, if you like any of my shows or any of my writings, that's how you show your appreciation. Tons of stuff there for you to download. I only do the sales spiel at the beginning and the end here. So let's get to the comic books. And this, friends, is a very special issue of the Mighty Thor. Maybe it doesn't look like it, because, yeah, you got Hulk fighting the Thor. You got a nice Ron Friends cover that I'd be surprised if it took him any longer to draw than the length of a sandwich. At this point in his career, in 1987, Ron Friends could draw this in his sleep. Now, he's about to take over as the main artist on this book, and it's some of his best work. He really stretches himself. Working with Joe Sinnott is transformative for him. He was good before he works with Joe Sinnott, and then after he works with Joe Sinnott for a few years, I think he gets a much stronger idea of where his strength lies, how to make good looking comic book art. And certainly after that point, he never draws a bum line. But he has nothing to do with this comic other than drawing the cover along with Al Milgrom. This is right after Walt Simonson left the series. So there was, I guess you could say, lowered expectations, because Walter Simonson, he'd been on Thor for 4 years, and in the space of those 4 years, he became completely identified with the character as strongly as Frank Miller did with Daredevil. And you know that Marvel had trouble with Daredevil after Frank Miller. After Frank Miller, they had Denny. The first time around, they had some good stuff from Klaus Janson, but that didn't last forever. After that was the Denny O'Neil run, and I don't think the Denny O'Neil run was his best writing by any means, even though it's got early David Mazzucchelli. And then Frank Miller came back a little bit, and they had a number of fill-ins. It seemed like years worth of fill-ins before they finally settled on Ann Nocenti, and she finally got a solid, steady artistic collaborator with John Romita Jr. But that took a long time. Frank Miller was a destabilizing force on that book because he was so prominent and so good on it. And you can say the same thing to a degree with Thor. Now, Thor was actually going to do pretty okay in terms of stability. They had a couple fill-ins before the new team settled in, and that was Ron Friends, who's doing the cover here, and Tom DeFalco and Joe Sinnott, who I already mentioned. And that ends up being a very, very good run. Kind of an underrated run from an underrated creative team in general. I think it has grown some in stature in the years since its release. I know that my buddy Chad thinks highly of it, and he's the #1 Thor authority that I know of. And I really enjoyed it. Maybe it wasn't my favorite book because I knew on some level that it was a little bit square and I was still a kid. But I still enjoyed it. I still bought it. And in hindsight, I can look back and say, yeah, it was one of the best books Marvel was putting out during its run. But it had a bit of a retro style to it that it wasn't going to endear it to the, even if it still sold really well on a lot of X-Men buyers, simply by virtue of statistics, a lot of X-Men buyers also bought Thor, so Thor remained pretty popular, but the creative team wasn't necessarily hot, so to speak. It was a book that was still aimed straight at the newsstand audience, and it was a newsstand performer for as long as there was any books to be sold on the newsstand. And then it suffered when the newsstand didn't exist. It was one of a number of those books, like Fantastic Four. Conan is the poster child. As soon as the gas station circuit dies for comic books, Conan's on his last legs. But all that is in the future. The interesting thing about this book has actually to do with the past, I guess you'd say, because this is plotted by Jim Shooter, scripted by Stan Lee. What? This is a Tom DeFalco book. This is from his tenure as editor-in-chief. This has to be either the last or one of the last books that was on the boards with Jim Shooter's name on it when he was forced out of the company, because this was cover dated November 1987. This hit in early fall of 1987. Shooter left Marvel in April of 1987. So like I say, maybe this was a valedictory gig. But the interesting thing is, it's not just that it's, either Jim Shooter's last or one of his very last Marvel comic books, or that it's a rare late period scripting job from Stan Lee. It's drawn by a fellow named Erik Larsen. Yeah, that's a familiar name. We've looked at Savage Dragon a few times on here. We love the Savage Dragon. We love everything Erik Larsen does. Now, this is very young Erik Larsen. It's not the youngest Erik Larsen. The youngest Erik Larsen was putting out comic books, independent books, during the black and white years in the mid-'80s. And then in the late 80s, he starts to creep in. I don't remember whether he's working at DC by late 87, but this is his first Marvel work. And I want to say he may even have instigated this somehow, because I've heard him talk about this. And the genesis of the story is wanting to draw a story where one of them actually wins. Because we've all read so many stories where neither of them actually wins. There's always, some kind of extenuating circumstance. And they still do it. To this day, they never want to be conclusive about it. So that was the challenge. I just want to draw one where there's a winner. Any winner. And Jim Shooter, maybe he had this plot, maybe this was something he had in a drawer, or like I say, maybe this was the last thing he was doing. I don't know. Maybe it was a last-minute favor from Stan, because I know that Jim and Stan worked together a lot. I honestly don't know. I do think the story of this comic has been told, because it is an interesting enough story, because this was Erik Larsen's first at-bat, working with an all-star panel. Now, the one thorn in this rose is Vince Colletta inks. But even that's kind of interesting, because Vince Colletta, he has inked, I want to say 3 of the Image founders, because he inked Erik Larsen, he inked Todd McFarlane, and he inked Mark Silvestri. So that's 3 of those guys that were inked by Vince Colletta. That, for me, is fascinating stuff. I love it. And I don't know, maybe it meant something to Vince Colletta that this was towards the end of his career. And the weird thing about Vince Colletta is his 80s work is sometimes pretty decent. Sometimes you can tell, like on his Dazzler, he almost seems like he gives a damn. Those books look pretty decent. He usually perked up when there was a pretty woman involved. That's the key to Vince Colletta. He does a pretty decent inking job anytime a woman shows up on panel. And then he's not that much interested in anything else. Come on. He just knocked over the whole pile. He just wants attention, folks. You know, you could be a lap cat and just sit here in my lap while I talk about the comics. No one would complain about that. So, you know, to a degree, I think some of this had to have been Jim Shooter calling this kid's bluff. Okay, kid, this is your first at-bat. You wanna handle the Hulk and Thor? Well, let's see if you got the chops, kid. And the thing is, this isn't the best comic book Erik Larsen would ever draw, but this is so much better than it has to be. You can tell. He throws everything he has in 19... Oh, thank you. Ah, you knocked him over again. Well, for the moment, you're sitting in my lap. Let's see, you want to read about Thor and the Hulk going at it? Yeah, this is one of Coletta's better ink jobs here. I've read a lot worse looking issues of Thor. You know, this is pretty basic stuff. Just Thor walking around interacting with normal people. Looks pretty normal. Actually, you know, he draws a Thor very much in the mold of, you know, it looks like 60s Thor. You know, the Kirby is always there at the forefront of Larsen. And certainly with Coletta's inking, that doesn't help matters. All this zit cream just dries your skin out. That's a nasty looking Hulk right there. Don't do that. He just keeps wanting to knock that pile over. What is so fascinating about doing that? And there you go. There's your two dudes. Catch the special video cassette offer. George Brett is going to show you how to improve your game. The 1980 American League MVP and the two-time league batting champ telling the secret of his incredible 314 batting average, 200 home runs, 100 RBIs, and 2,000 hits. That's pretty good. I don't know if I'd pay $14.95 for a VHS tape of this man telling me how to play baseball. Sometimes the past is a different country, man. Look at this. Look at this. You can still see, you know, in the nucleus. That's Erik Larsen right there, right in your face. You know, there's the Kirby. There's that manga influence early for the American comic book industry. But he's one of the first guys who really starts digging into the popular stuff after Miller blows it all wide open. Oh man, this is nice. They're going at it. That's what this comic is about. It didn't waste any time setting it up. What are you doing? So what's happening here? Well, you know, you have seen these moves before. You know, they go at it a couple times. Hulk says, you know, put that hammer down. I'm not fighting with a weapon. You know, give me a fair fight, Buster. And so, you know, Thor realizes he's enjoying the fight. Yeah, look at all these background characters. Oh my God. You know, inexplicably, Vince Coletta cares about what he's doing suddenly because you can see the people in the background. And look at all the bits of glass. He would not have drawn all these pieces of glass. Although, I don't know, he may have erased more. But look at this. Oh, wow. Oh. See, now, if this didn't have Jim Shooter and Stan Lee writing it, I would maybe question if that were quite in character for the version of the Hulk at this point, but this is not, I think, any specified time, so we can just assume it's maybe a meaner version of the guy. Because he's not thinking straight, and he's like, unless you get rid of the hammer and actually fight me fair, and see, what was I saying? This is very well drawn. Very well inked woman. That's probably the best inked panel in the entire book. Why? What was I just saying? I respect that. I don't necessarily respect everything about Vince Colletta, but I respect that part of him. Who's coloring this? This is Paul Becton. Okay. Rick Parker on letters. Wow, look at this. This is great. This is fantastic. And the 80s was good for TSR. What changed in the market from when they could put out practically, monthly or more product, and now they seems like they really struggle with the one they have. Something isn't right there. It seems like if the market was able to support all these different type of games back then, it should be able to, but I'm not a big role-playing person. But TSR put a lot of money in Marvel's coffers over the years. Like I say, get game ads back in comic books. Doesn't matter what game it is, role-playing, video, collectible card. Put it back in comics and, Man, look at this. And they knock up a paint factory? All these little details. You can tell. Erik Larsen is having the time of his life. He's hitting it out of the park. Look at that. He gets tangled up in the swing set. Yeah. This is Jim Shooter going out of his way to throw this kid a fastball. And Erik Larsen is hitting it, and it is pretty remarkable to see. It's not the best comic book he has ever drawn, but this is so much better than anyone could expect. This was a real step forward, I think, doing this issue specifically. Do you know what your children are? Who drew that? Oh, there's the BOG, so I'm assuming Bogdanovich. That's a very memorable ad because this was a big thing. If you don't remember, if you weren't around for the 80s, do you know where your children are? It was a huge campaign. I don't really understand what it was about in hindsight. Well, things have gone so far in the other direction. The idea that any parent wouldn't know where their child is at 10 p.m. is seems like a cultural artifact from another time. Look at that, and then they get knocked into a supermarket. So hey, Vince, you want to draw like shopping carts and all of these little containers on the shelf. Man, this is a great comic book for so many reasons. Oh, and here's someone's phone number. Yeah, on page 17 of Thor 385, 1-800-238-5355. See, now that's an 800 number, so it's a commercial number, even if it's still going. I don't know what it is. I'm not calling it. That sounds like something from like a Japanese horror movie. Like you call the number that's printed on the side of the comic book and, oh man, look at that. Look at that. You have to admit, this is a much cooler comic book than you were expecting. Stoom. Even without Hammer, you keep fighting back. Why can't Hulk defeat you? Why? Because I be son of Odin. Give up, I say thee never. 'Tis madness, 'tis sheerest folly. Why do we fight? What is to gain? And what of the incalculable damage we have wrought? Stay down, Hulk must win. But then his hammer comes back. And he's like, yeah, Hulk's stronger than Thor. Hulk need no hammer to smash enemy. So basically, interesting. For a Thor comic book, actually say like, strong or no, if it really came down to it, the Hulk is probably a little bit stronger than Thor, but Thor has that dog in him, so it evens out in the end. And then, with the hammer, the hammer is, as the Hulk is right to point out, in a fair fight, it is an unfair advantage. I who am sprung from gods turned savage as he. Goaded by a lusting for victory, my rage blinded me to the damage the suffering thus caused. What doth it matter who be the stronger? 'Twas he who ended the fray, whilst I hungered to battle on in the name of empty pride. Yea, to my eternal shame, on this bleak day a god turned monster too. So yeah, not only does the Hulk basically he gets the technical victory. Now, admittedly, before the hammer returns. So yeah, all this happens in the time it takes Thor's hammer to come back from a really long throw. And basically, by the time the hammer comes back and the fight's over, Hulk has the upper hand. And then given enough time, given a long enough time scale, Hulk might take it. But, he's got the hammer. Keep hammer, Hulk doesn't care. Hulk only fights when angry. Anger gone now. Hulk will crush Thor next time. See, that's a fun ending for a Thor comic book. Sometimes your man fights the Hulk. That's the cool thing about the Hulk, is that he can show up in theory and in practice. He can show up in any Marvel book and beat the tar out of the hero. And it's accepted. That's just one of those things that happens. If the Hulk shows up in your book, he's going to steamroll you. And it's sort of a trope in and of itself, is just how to tackle the Hulk. One of the best Frank Miller stories that Frank Miller didn't write is the Roger McKenzie story, where the Hulk goes downtown and Daredevil's the only guy anywhere near who can do anything, and he ends up getting put in the hospital. But it's a great Daredevil story because, it cuts to the heart of Daredevil. He's a guy who's going to put his body on the line if he has to, even against the Hulk. I don't recognize any of these names. They're about the last stretch of the Simonson run. And I want to say next issue, or maybe the next issue after it, might be the first of the DeFalco Friends run. But see, the new gang is in charge here, with actually very stable, I think, for a good 5-6 years. It's Tom DeFalco in charge, Grunwald as his first lieutenant. Oh, and there's a quote from Mary Jane Water Buffalo from the quote of the month. Petey, pig of my heart, marry me, hug me, squeeze me the way a fashion-conscious water buffalo should be squeezed. I think Peter Porker did marry Mary Jane Water Buffalo with the Marvel Tales era. There were a lot of Peter Porker Marvel Tales backups. They did that for a good couple of years, I think. So yeah, Marvel's got a healthy publishing slate in the early DeFalco years. They're publishing those Charles Vess run of Warriors 3 stories and Marvel Fanfare. Very good stories. If you don't have them already, you need to get them. The Charles Vess Warriors 3 books. Oh, this is the same month as the Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson Thing and Hulk graphic novel, Big Change. One of the best of the graphic novels, period. But certainly one of the best Thing and Hulk stories. It's fantastic. Top shelf Bernie Wrightson. Top shelf Bernie Wrightson. And they're already starting their Mobius line, because they're doing Mobius, Arzak, and other fantasy stories. Second volume of the deluxe Mobius series from Epic Comics features the world-famous adventures of Arzak, the pterodactyl riding warrior. As a special bonus, 5 pages of never-before-seen Arzak art are included. Other stories include the autobiographical fantasy The Detour, a fine addition to your library of mature fantasy literature. See? Marvel was cooking. Marvel was cooking by the time you got to the late 80s. When they fumigated the place after Jim Shooter, they were publishing Mobius. They felt for a little while as if the wind was at their back, because they were selling a lot of issues of the Punisher. He was just coming into his prime here, issue 4 of his ongoing series. They were deep into the Mark Silvestri X-Men now. I think he's been on the book for at least a couple months by now. Spider-Man, I want to say... Yeah, they're onto the Spider-Man marriage. And after that, the books stabilize. And then Todd McFarlane starts next... Yeah, this is 294. So Todd McFarlane's 5 months away. Or 4 months away from taking over Amazing Spider-Man. And then, it's all over. That's an era-defining hit. Amazing Spider-Man was selling neck and neck with Uncanny X-Men. And you had the Punisher nipping at his heels. And, Silver Surfer. This run of the Silver Surfer was a bestseller, too. Had Nascenti just beginning her run on Daredevil. John Romita Jr. is going to take over in 2 months, but I think you got 2 months of Rick Leonardi drawing a Wolverine team up. Oh, wow, and this is the same month as Kraven's Last Hunt running in the Spider-Man books. Now, you want to talk about an impactful story. Marvel was really suffering in the mid-'80s when DC, they had Camelot 3000, they had Ronin, they had Dark Knight Returns, they had Watchmen. All those books, although I think maybe Watchmen, maybe it had just finished its run. But DC they had the infrastructure to be printing much better books than Marvel was capable of producing. But, Kraven's Last Hunt was an attempt by them to counter just that. And people still read Kraven's Last Hunt. It is still one of the highlights of the era. And they got Mobius. I think that's down to Archie Goodwin, but still, you're doing something right if you're publishing Mobius, Charles Vess, and let's not forget, they were also publishing Gru by now. If you got Sergio Aragones and Mobius and Charles Vess coming out in a month, you're doing pretty good. That's Marvel in 1987. And this Meatloaf ad. Man, this Meatloaf ad. This is an indelible memory for a generation. Heroes helping heroes. Help the 1987 International Summer Olympics Games. This is for Special Olympics. So, I don't have any idea how much money, if any, Meatloaf was actually able to attract to that cause in 1987, but, God bless him. What do we got going? What do we got going here? Okay, I got one for you. X-Force 10. Not just any X-Force, post-Rob Liefeld X-Force. Rob was out the door. Now, my recollection, I've heard this story so many times, and, I don't necessarily want to say I remember the details, but my understanding was that, at least at the very beginning, he didn't think that he was going to have to leave X-Force. So he made plans to stay on the book for the foreseeable future, and then Image really got going, and that was obviously not going to stick. He had to leave what he was doing. Jim Valentino had to leave Guardians of the Galaxy. So the line was suddenly in the lurch. They were down their most popular and some of their most consistent talent going into what was already then obviously a boom, market. By 1992, by the time Image is getting started and we got the 30th anniversary of Spider-Man, that was big too. It is a raging bull market. And suddenly Marvel is sitting there with their pants down. And it took them, I'd say it took them a good couple of years to where they felt like they had stabilized artistically. The art started to be decent again. They always had a few good artists. They always had John Romita Jr. He never left. He was still doing good work for them. But the John Romita Jr.'s were thin on the ground at Marvel in 1992. And they were having to staff the books by whoever they could grab who could do a passable imitation of one of the Image guys. So Mark Pasella, Dan Panosian. Now, Dan Panosian had been in, we've looked at some of his very early 90s inking work. He was doing like backups in Captain America in like 1991. So he was coming up the hard way before he started working with Rob Liefeld and doing Prophet, which I think is the book that really put him on the map. And so who's drawing the interiors? I want to know who's drawing it first. Because Rob Liefeld is gone. He is out the door just about, because he's being credited with just plot. That's it. He's already not doing the art anymore. We got the Pasella and Panosian team on interiors. Fabian Nicieza, he's going to be the one island of stability for the first couple years of this book. And he's the first person to actually to do something with it, because he just sort of starts writing it like a normal comic book again, which it really wasn't. The first year of X-Force is by no means a normal comic. It is a very strange comic book. And Fabian Nicieza sort of makes it look a little bit more like a normal comic book. I'd say he starts working with Greg Capullo, who is really becomes a superstar off the back of this. And it's from there he's snapped right up by Todd McFarlane. Chris Eliopoulos on letters, Dana Moore's-Head on colors. So yeah, this is two people who I want to say they knew Rob. I don't know. I don't think they were Extremes. Although I don't know. I don't think they were Extreme Studio. Well, I also don't know when Extreme Studios was founded as such. I know it was already a going concern by '93 because I own the 1993 Image or Extreme Studios tour book. Again, I don't think they're in it, but I'm not sure. But they could do. See, a passable imitation of very strange and strangely constrained art, which is how I would describe Rob Liefeld. It doesn't look good. There's only so much sugarcoating the fact that this is a poorly drawn comic book, but it's poorly drawn on purpose, and that makes it worse. That makes it worse. And man, they really sold a lot of Terminator 2 video games. It was rated R. Nowadays, they wouldn't be selling a kid's video game for an R-rated movie, I don't think. When's the last time they did that? Man. Of course, at a certain point, they stopped selling video games strictly for kids, too, so I guess that's where you draw that line. Oh, man. This is Kane, who is being credited as Weapon X on the cover, because for a very brief period of time in the 90s, they were trying to push this guy as being named Weapon X because he had something to do with the Weapon X program as described in Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X. I remember just really hating this comic. And I'll be honest with you, Dan Panosian has since become one of my favorite artists, straight up. I could never in a million years have predicted that Dan Panosian would become the artist he'd become, because he's just inking this, and he's inking it in the classic, Extreme Studios mutation of the Frank Miller inking from Ronin, which, he got from Japan. So, it's like a third or fourth generation photocopy. So on that basis, perhaps, it's interesting but terrible. But what is really interesting about this comic book is just how much better the inker, because he's the inker here, Dan Panosian, how much better this inker would become, because straight up, I have bought comics because Dan Panosian drew the cover. I'm not ashamed. He is an excellent artist. And I have to admit, the fact that I hated his work so much when I was a kid, early Liefeld, like his New Mutants. His New Mutants is fun. That was a fun book. It seems like as soon as he really gets the reins himself, things start to get a bit shrill. You know, maybe that's a good word to describe the early run of X-Force. It's a very shrill comic book. You definitely need someone else there to be stirring the sauce to help. And the early X-Force, you know, he was more or less being given the keys to the asylum, so to speak. And this is an attempt to ape that mood, and it's a very weird mood. This actually kind of looks like a Greg Capullo anticipates some of what he does because it's incorporating Mike Mignola. Mike Mignola only drew the one issue of X-Force, but it's one of the most influential comic books he ever drew. It's just that one issue, hugely influential. It changed the way Mike Mignola draw, and it certainly changed the way I see Rob Liefeld's art. So if you're looking at it without looking at it too closely, it's like, okay, here is Rob Liefeld's style. Here are the exact same physical proportions as they draw Fist of the North Star with. Here's the way Frank Miller drew panels in Ronin. And they're going out of their way to not draw women that well at all. Yeah, I don't think Rob Liefeld could draw a woman very well. And that's one noted shortcoming, I think, of his particular approach. Someone likes to stick his claws deep into me, and I don't think that's fair. What was I just saying about the Terminator? They were still on I think the movie had been out for at least a year, maybe a little less than a year by the time this comic saw print in early '92. But they were still hyping Terminator 2, and this was a straight a straight rip of that. But there's an ad for Spawn in the Entertainment This Month. What are you calling this? The advertising page. There's a little column for the early Valiant stuff. What was I saying? The new Barry Windsor Smith book, Archer and Armstrong. Eternal Warrior #1. Magnus is up to 15. So the Valiant universe pretty much already exists. I think Unity is just a few months away. And then, it's all downhill once they take Shooter off. And the Infinity War, of all these things, which do you think I invested heavily in? Was I buying the early Valiant? No, I didn't buy any Valiant until Shooter was gone, way gone. I bought a copy of Spawn #1, and I didn't really get into Spawn until a little bit later. No, I was into the Infinity War. I was hopeless. Absolutely hopeless in every way. Man, look, and you can tell. Even this, maybe especially because it's such a blatant attempt to copy what Liefeld does. You can see all of the stuff that Liefeld ripped from, all that. I don't know. I actually don't know whether he saw Fist of the North Star in cartoon or in book form, because you can see either way. These are the general proportions that you have if you learn those martial arts. You get the tiny head and the huge thighs, the massive thighs. There's that robot arm. Oh my goodness. Tomorrow we pay the Morlocks a little visit, leave Mask's head on a pike as a gentle reminder to their next leader about what will happen to them if they try to cross X-Force again. So they were in this really, that's a direct lift from a Liefeld panel, I think, which means it might be a direct lift from an Art Adams panel. So this is what you want if you're reading X-Force. You want a group that'll take it to the bad guys. They're about to launch a whole crossover to get to the bottom of what this guy's deal is. Executioner's Song, which runs at the end of the year. Terrible art, weird story. You can tell they're floundering. But it was still hot. I like this background. This background that looks like a felt tip pen, and it took 30 seconds to draw, is like the most interesting line in the book. Oh, here's one of those trivia games. Play Marvel Master Vision. Call 1-900-420 6622 and play the ultimate Marvel trivia game. So it was something to do with the characters in this picture. I called the Marvel fan phone, and that was a 900 number. But I didn't do it very often. You know, it wasn't like I was calling all the 900 numbers. I had no interest in a game. I wanted the inside skinny. Oh, wow. You know, that crosses over from being wonky to being, like, kind of awesome. Just this weird over-rendering everywhere in this panel. Almost looks like a Don Simpson drawing. And you can see in the little bits and pieces of detail work, like on the lines around like Boom Boom's lips here, you can tell Panosian already has better technique than this work is letting him show. Oh my God. Jesus. My God. What is wrong with that man? Oh my Lord. Call 1-800-551-5181 and you could win one of these 16-bit video games. No, come on. I have to admit, I have no idea. No idea where I was before I was so rudely interrupted. And I get up and go play with him, and you know what he does? When I get up out of my chair, walk into the other room to play with the cat, he's just sitting there looking out the window. Richter's back. He was gone for the first stretch of the book. One of the handful of characters written out alongside, like, you know, Wolfsbane, Warlock. They weren't going to be part of X-Force. Wolfsbane wouldn't actually join X-Force until, like, the 2000s, another incarnation of the group. And Warlock, you know, he stayed in limbo for a while. Don't get me started about Douglock. Palladium RPGs. Rifts. I remember Rifts. What are you doing? Well, we'll come back and look at the bullpen bulletins here. Oh, and there's our dude. There's our dude. Looking very much like Rob Liefeld drew him. And like I say, this guy, in 1992, he's still a cipher. He doesn't even have the bare amount of, whoa, what's going on with that thumb there? He doesn't even have the bare amount of development from like that first miniseries. It takes a while for him to get anything, and it all just sort of accretes very slowly. And then Joe Kelly confuses what we do know. Let's not get into, like, if T-Ray is... no, we're not going there. What are you doing? He's trying to keep me from finishing my video. In the future, there will be no money. Instead, people will use comic books as currency. And the rarer a comic is, the more it will be worth. The richest man in the world will be the man who owns a complete set of Street Poet Ray. Oh. Someone probably got hazed in the office for that one. I'm guessing based on that. In the future, World Championship Wrestling writer Mike... Oh, come on. So what's Stan telling us about in his soapbox? Oh, he's telling us that James Cameron is going to do an X-Men movie. Now, we all know James Cameron, of course, did many X-Men movies. You know, he was just coming off of Terminator 2. He was probably talking with a lot of people about doing a lot of things. And the cool-o-meter. Dissing fellow pros in print is uncool. I don't know why he still wants to destroy that front window. I have no idea why. Oh, in the future, managing editor Marie Javin's wall of cow drawings by famous artists will become a wall of goats instead. And I have verified on the social media that the wall of cows still exists. It's been moved to the DC offices, of course, but it still exists, and apparently it is still added to, which honestly, frankly, I want an art book of those cows. I've been fantasizing, dreaming about Marie Javins's cows since the early 90s. They've been hyping these cows up, so I want a coffee table book with every cow on that woman's wall. It is a piece of comics history, I believe, that must see the light of day. All right, here's one for you. Spider-Man, 101 Ways to End the Clone Saga. Now again, this may very well show up on the TikTok one of these days, because I love little oddities like this, and definitely this is one of the odder comic books Marvel has ever published. This is January 97. This is at the end, right at the end of the Clone Saga. And they are, I guess, exorcising the demon from the building by publishing an entire comic book about how silly they are. And here are the editors, here are the creative team who are inundated with all of these Spider-Men. That's Herrera, is that Ben Herrera? Ben Herrera, he pencils the book. Written by Mark Bernardo, inked by Mike Christian, lettered by Janice Chang, colored by Kevin Tinsley, edited by Ralph Macchio. So it's basically, get away from there. So it's, it's the adventures of the men who solved the Clone Saga dilemma. I think that's supposed to be Bob Harris. What are you doing? Every time I turn my back, he makes a beeline to try and destroy the front window. Like I say, 97, maybe a bit old for the model kits. They still make model kits. I don't know how popular they are. Not just the, literally, what was I saying? He won't let me finish a video because the moment I turn my back, he just makes a beeline for that front window. He's already demolished the Venetian blind. What is left for him to do? Anyway, so we get a little dime store recap of the Clone Saga, all of the Clone Saga, and then I think the point of the book is we're seeing different versions of how it could have ended with, tongue slightly in cheek. Black Cat finally figures out she might have been with a clone. I don't think they used her at all during the original clone sequence. Hey Bob, the legal department just called. They need to see you about Scott Lobdell's latest Wizard interview. See, that's the level of humor here. So, this version, we've reached the point where he just doesn't care about the spray bottle. That's how much he wants that front window. Do you get this from other comic book YouTube channels? No, you do not. You get better editing, better lighting, you get microphones, you probably get a better attitude, but you don't get me fighting with my cat. The Jandeck of YouTube comic book videos. So I'm not following what's going on here at all. It's kind of a cool looking Spider-Man. Another one. Oh, so this one comes back from a time travel adventure. Okay, because this was actually a Marvel 2 team-up storyline where he did some time travel. So I guess that would be the way to get around it, is to have him come back and also be Spider-Man. And then this one, Ben Reilly starts having regular Spider-Man memories. Or memories from the time when he wasn't the regular Spider-Man. There's Ralph Macchio. Carnage. Kind of a cool looking Carnage. From the short-lived period when the Green Goblin was Ben Urich's nephew. They were gonna kill him off very soon, and he came back as a bad guy too. So, you know, they always do that. They come back as a bad guy. The Spider-Man books have a real bad habit of just bringing back characters you want to see, but they're a villain now. So, like, there's Judas Traveler, and Scryer, and Judas Traveler ended up in the X-Men books, I want to say, of all places. Which, I mean, he didn't make any sense in the 90s, so I guess it doesn't make any sense. He just shows up where he wants to now, too. So now they're in a restaurant, and they're running through the permutations of these plots. Oh, and and here's a joke about Mephisto coming to make a deal for Spider-Man's soul. That's funny. That's quite funny right there. I didn't remember that part of it. I haven't looked at this comic book in well over 20 years. I haven't read this comic book since long before that whole thing. My goodness. So so like I said, be Peter Sanderson. He's here with all these continuity glitches. Why would Mephisto do that? Why would anyone take him seriously? Good question. Okay. I'm too young to wear a hermia truss. Well, that's the level of humor we're getting here. Going back to, see, they were just filled with this Judas Traveler character that they never really had any answer of who he even was. Here's Stunner. I can't remember what happened to her. Maybe she died or something. Probably. Oh, it turns out that Mary Jane was a computer hologram. I got it. Oh, and here's the master programmer. Nothing really became him. Big book of comic gimmicks. We've got to wrap up the Clone Saga and make it work. Oh. You know, the thing is, this is during the Onslaught storyline where Spider-Man didn't really have anything to do with that, or Heroes Reborn. His one contribution during his crossovers was he had to fight a bunch of Onslaught Sentinels. And that is actually one of the cooler things from that crossover, is just getting to see a Spider-Man, not the Spider-Man, but a Spider-Man, basically in the fight for his life against a couple Sentinels. Now, of course, he survives, but... Greetings, I am a Watu, and I declare that never in all my centuries of observing the multiverse have I witnessed alternate realities such as these, not even the time I sniffed Bedunian glue back on Aldebaran 4. It just goes to show sometimes even the Watcher would do well to avert his gaze. I think I've already said how they did resolve the Clone Saga was the worst mistake they made in 25 years, bringing back Norman Osborn. And you could look and say, like, oh, yeah, they've gotten a lot out of Norman Osborn since he's been back. I just think it should never have been done, ever. It was a basic sin that the books never recovered from. Wasn't the marriage. It was bringing Norman back, in my opinion. Oh, They were already doing these live-action Disney remakes back in the late 90s, so you can't say it's a new phenomenon by any means. Do we have time for one more? We have time for one more if I want to. All right, here's one I had bopping around the pile for a while. Scarlet Witch #1. One of her very few solo series. She's actually had more solo series in the new century than in the old. I think this is her only attempt at headlining before the year 2000. And even then it'd be a while. It'd be a good while until after House of M that they would ever try to give her another solo book. But she's had a few in the last decade or so, I think. She did headline with the Vision and Scarlet Witch. They had 2 successful miniseries in the 80s, and then they decided to end that marriage, and both characters struggled in the 90s without a direction because of it. They had a direction, and then John Byrne decided he did not like that direction. And I think, sometimes I will defend some of the choices Byrne has made as ultimately being generative choices. Even stuff like his Superman books, which I know his Superman books don't have the best reputation in some quarters nowadays, but they did what they were supposed to do in terms of providing a launch pad for other creators. They set the Superman line on a pretty good path. You can't say the same for what Byrne did with the Vision and Scarlet Witch. He tore the guts out of the characters. He did, and there was nothing there to replace it. They both wandered around from status quo to status quo for decades, really. And there's the Addams Family sequel. People remember this one quite well. It was a great movie. Both of them are good. I think the second one was actually better, which isn't very often you can say that. So what's going on here? Some magic something or other. We're dealing with Andy Lanning and Dan Abnett. Used to be a team. They fell out a while back. I don't think they made the reason public. But it was, they worked together side by side for years and then never again. Penciler John Higgins, not necessarily a big name I remember. Inker Mark McKenna, someone who did ink a few books. What are you talking about? He is meowing at the door. There's no reason for him to meow at the door. You never leave the house. You have no reason to go out that door. He's an indoor cat. He doesn't know what outside is. I saved him from outside, is what I did. And this is the thanks I get. I saved his life. So anyway, these warrior women of Amazar, so they're being killed by iron golems. So, rub the serial numbers off the Amazons. Here you go. Well, this is actually pretty fun. A couple pages in, it's got some energy to it. Gargan, wizard, conqueror. For a lunar month we have laid siege to Amazar. Now we commit to the fires of Nevermore. The Amazite women are lost and leaderless. Their witch queen is sick and dying. For the last week, she's lain in her chamber suffering from an unknown malady. Oh, Marvel clothes. God help those who can't decide. That's actually kind of a heavy message for a Marvel ad. God help those who can't decide. This is admittedly a little bit cooler than I remembered. It's out there. This is like just crazy fantasy stuff that has no bearing on anything. None of these characters have ever been seen before. But I'm guessing that they're going to impact upon Scarlet Witch very soon here. And still the last gasp of the big push for the sports cards. Although, they never stop making sports cards. They still make tons of baseball and football cards. Someone collects them. Although it looks like they have collectors now in the same way that comic book people do. Oh. So this guy gets his face ripped off by someone. Oh, this is a dream. Avengers West compound. And it's kind of nice looking. These are decent facial expressions. Never heard of this person before, but this is a decent comic for someone clearly in their early career. not without some style. Guaranteed Christmas delivery, your Ultraverse starter kit. Marvel 1993 swimsuit special. They need to do a big coffee table book of all the swimsuit specials and the Marvel Marvel Illustrated books. Was that the name of them? The yearly, the yearbooks they were doing? Those were great. I love a book of those. So she's working out, just hanging around. Believe I'm crabby, witch. I've agreed to toughen you up to prepare you for any danger. Stay alert, be vigilant. If I'd been a hostile, you'd be dead by now. Good job, U.S. agent. You're doing your best to ingratiate yourself with your surroundings. Oh, and a bunch of monsters there. See, that's a cool-looking Iron Man. These are some funky-looking monsters. You get to see the Avengers West Coast in action. I love this team. I thought the Avengers West Coast was a cooler team. And, of course, it got canceled and replaced with Force Works. They put out an Avengers West Coast a little while ago with the Kate Bishop Hawkeye. And I think Gwenpool and Kid Omega. I want to say that they were in it. It was good. It was good. I read it a while ago. The Witch is Mine. Yeah, so, you know, that's an interesting angle there, just looking at Julia's hair. Holler if you need us, Wanda. So she's calling Agatha Harkness. Since we last spoke, Wanda, I have discovered that a private library in the New England village of Unity may hold several ancient and obscure volumes that could shed some light on your nature as a Nexus being. Oh, they're always messing with her powers. Today it's Nexus being, tomorrow will be dark magic, and I like the last Scarlet Witch solo series they did. I bought it. I started buying it for the art, but it turned out to be a really good series. And apparently they're going to bring her back for another go. With the same creative team, I'll give it a shot. I liked it. Yeah, I don't know necessarily. Maybe in a better market she could be a better headliner. It seems like she's got her own fans, but maybe not enough to really push the market. And here are the VHS tapes for the X-Men cartoons. I think this is Andrew Wildman art on at least a couple of these pieces, although not on these. These look different. That's a nice page. Definitely making good use of spotted blacks there. Who was inking again? Was it? Oh yeah, it was McKenna, wasn't it? McKenna. I think we've encountered that name before. Oh, that's cool. Oh, there's Master P. Master Pandemonium. Yeah, there you go. I mean, diving right into the worst of it. No one likes Master Pandemonium. I mean, find me a Master Pandemonium fan and I will show you a liar. The one thing people remember about him is that he had baby hands. He doesn't even have the baby hands here. Man, those baby hands, that was an indelible image. I don't think I ever played the port of the Captain American Avengers game. I don't think I ever saw this cabinet either. I wasn't hanging out at. There was nowhere around me with a lot of arcade games in like 94 or 93, whenever this was. The only way to play the game, the Quarterback Club. Were they not doing Madden yet? I guess they weren't doing Madden yet. That seemed like that took over as pretty much the brand name to be beat in that field. All right, so late in the DeFalco era, the publishing lineup has ballooned. So this is just what's on sale this week. This is like half as big as the hype box in the late 80s, but this is weekly. So they're putting out a lot of material, more material than the market can bear in 1990. Well, this is 94. So this is the tail end of 93. The meteor is hit. Not all the dinosaurs are dead yet, but the meteor has hit. Oh yeah, but this is the month, Avengers West Coast 102, the end of an era. I love the book, and then they ended it. Cable, the first issue, or the first Cable ongoing series is still at issue 7. Daredevil 319 was on a second printing. That was a hot run. Early Scott McDaniel. I'm almost done. Can't you just let me finish what I'm doing? My God. Ren and Stimpy up to 14. It lasts a while. I want to say Ren and Stimpy lasts into the 30s, maybe even the 40s. It did well. Hawkeye had an ongoing too. You can tell. They were flooding the stands. They were putting out mini series for, Avengers West Coast B Team here. Sax and Violins, that was Peter David and George Perez's create-your-own thing, which was kind of a tongue-in-cheek cheesecake book. Because Epic also made a big push around this time as well. There were a lot of Epic books. They did a whole heavy hitters line, almost none of which made any impact whatsoever. I only bought a couple of them. I just wasn't that deep into Marvel that I was pulling the heavy hitters books. And I don't think they did very well because they did not keep doing the heavy hitters line. But, Pinhead, like from Hellraiser, he had his own solo book. They were just in the first couple months of the Barkerverse. Clive Barker had his own line of comics. Starbrand #1, or Starblast #1. Wasn't I just talking about Starblast? She-Hulk's about to be canceled. Spider-Man 2099's up to issue 15, so that book still has some life in it. Gru the Wanderer, he's about to leave. I want to say maybe he lasts another few issues, but he's on his way to Image very soon. Namor's almost done. He doesn't last much past 50. This is issue 46. A lot of these books are about to be canceled. That's just the circle of life. I mean, look at this. Look at this subscription ad. Biker Mice from Mars, Tech World. I think Tech World actually did last a couple years, strangely enough. Harrowers, which was another Hellraiser spinoff, with Gene Colan art. And you've never seen that. That is Gene Colan art on a Hellraiser spinoff that you've never even seen. Law Dog, which was an epic thing that didn't last a year. Here is a special box just for the Barkerverse books, as I mentioned. Cyberspace 3000, that was Marvel UK. I'd be surprised if that made 8 issues. Death's Head 2, I think that made a year. I think that made over a year, but I'm not sure. Some of these Midnight Suns books, I think Darkhold's already gone. Darkhold has already left the subscription form. Night Stalkers lasts a couple of years. I don't know how long the Ghost Rider and Blaze books last. But yeah, these are just... I can't support this many books anymore. That's just the name of the game. All right. Well, it's a fun special anniversary, other than the fact that someone likes to interrupt me when I'm talking. So please check out the Patreon. That's how you support this show. If you want me to do more of it, that's how you tell me. What else? Check out daily comic book reviews. I post the same reviews to TikTok and Instagram. I do a podcast with Claire Napier on, it's called Udder Madness, and it's about Top Cow Comics. That's Witchblade, The Darkness, Cyberforce, Mark Silvestri, all that good stuff. What else? I got stuff up almost every week. Lately it's been more bi-weekly, but there's usually something by me on the front page of the Journal. There should be a new article on Frank Miller up there by now, actually, if that interests you. What else? I don't know. I think I got to go deal with the problem child. Well, thanks for sticking by for 50 issues of this madness. Maybe we'll do 50 issues more. I have a lot of fun doing it. Hopefully you have a lot of fun. Tell everyone you know so that we can pump those numbers. Please have a wonderful day. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to the world. Be kind to animals. Be kind to small children. Please do well and be well.